very warm good evening. So, ma'am will be joining in another 5 minutes, so we can start, ma'am. There have been already a technical
Yeah,
error.
definitely we can start.
All right, thank you
Yeah,
so
we
much.
can definitely start because already we are getting late.
All right. Yes, Deeksha, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are here for online expert talk session on the topic Atmanirbhar Bharat, skill development and entrepreneurship, which is organized for the PGDM batch 2022. The eminent speaker amongst us for this online expert talk is Mr. Jayant Shah, who is Executive Director of Academy of India, Marketing and CEO, AIM Parshuraman Center of Service Excellence. On behalf of School of Management, ITS Mohan Nagar, Ghaziabad, I extend the very welcome to you. And I am sure the session would be highly engrossing and informative. Further, I would like to request Honorable Director Management, Dr. Vidya Sekri ma'am, to share her words of wisdom.
Since ma'am is not there, so we can move forward.
Okay, ma'am. Um, sir, I would like to request. Uh, okay. So, ma'am is not there. Sir Jayant, sir, can you start the session? Over
No,
to you.
let us, okay, just a minute. I would like to introduce Sir with his brief profile. Uh, can we have the last slide? Okay, yes, Mr. Jain Shah is a chartered accountant. This is not readable, is a chartered accountant and an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India since 1982. A graduate in commerce and law, Jain Shah sir has varied experience in the organizational and management consultancy and is currently associated with the eminent management guru, Dr. Jagdish Sheth. Mr. Jain Shah has been associated with the Academy of Indian Marketing since inception and is also instrumental in the formation of Academy of Indian Marketing, that is AIM. AIM is a non-profit organization having top 40B school as it is a member and is active in promoting research in the area of marketing. Mr. Shah is Executive Director of Academy of India Marketing and also a CEO of AIM Parshuraman Center of Service Excellence. Mr. Shah currently holds several notable positions, including as a member of Board of Governors of IILM New Delhi and IILM University of Gurgaon, member of editorial board of Journal of Creating Value, advisory board member of BOT VFX India USA, ASMA Academia Pune, FMRT Faridabad, and a couple of educational, institutional, and startup companies. His passion is to mentor young students, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the areas of personal and professional development. So on behalf of ITS Ghaziabad School of Management, sir, we extend a very warm and a heartful welcome to you. Over to you, sir. You can start.
Thank you, Garima, and thank you all the students of the PGDM batch of 2020-2022. And thank you for inviting me for this talk, which I am sure it is going to enlighten the students in their journey which they are commencing today with ITS Ghaziabad. Initially, I would like to just speak a few. Please remove this logo and you can put my picture over here. Yeah, can you bring on the screen my photo?
Yes, I am playing. Yes, yes.
Okay. So why I have chosen this topic, Atmanirbhar Bharat? Because today we are at such a stage that our Prime Minister has given the slogan of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And Atmanirbharta is all about independence or self-dependence. And self-dependence means when you are looking at your future, what you should do and what you should not do. It all, no, please remove this. Don't bring the PPT right now. So Atmanirbhar is all about self-dependence and how we should create our own manufacturing, our own services sector, so that we are not dependent on others. Presently, with the political scenario which we are seeing, what is happening all around us. So it is very much required that if we can manufacture or we can produce our requirements, we need not have to depend on outside countries to fulfill our requirements. And in this regard, we have to become more and more self-reliant, self-dependent, and probably independent. So this is why I have chosen this Atmanirbhar topic. And in this presentation, while I'm going through the presentation, I will talk to you more about in detail what is all this, why Atmanirbhar, and what will be the impact of this journey. So can you go through the presentation, please? Can you bring
Yes,
the
I'll share the
presentation?
slide now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So our topic for today is Atmanirbhar Bharat, and Atmanirbhar Bharat through skill development and entrepreneurship. Because if we have to become self-dependent, we have to understand the finer points about what is skill development and what is entrepreneurship. Because today everybody is looking at, and whenever we are seeing on every forum, people are asking about job creation, and job creation. But who is going to create the job? Is it the only sole responsibility of the government to create the job, or is it the responsibility of we as citizens of India to create job for us also and for our fellow citizens? So what I think is it's more important that if we are properly skilled and we have the entrepreneurial mindset, then we can create jobs for the country, and we cannot depend on government, because government has only limited number of jobs which it can create. Otherwise, it is going to create more chaos in the process, and country cannot become a developed country. So in every country, if you see, there are very few government jobs is being created every year. But it is the responsibility of the private sector to create more and more jobs. And how to become an entrepreneur into the private sector to create more jobs, it is our responsibility. So as on today, next slide please. As on today, if we look at, then there are 4 challenges to become Atmanirbhar. The first one is the political challenge, the second is social challenge, the third is economical challenge, and fourth is educational challenge. Next slide, please. If we look at the political challenges, the political challenge mainly is about fragmented but hostile opposition. Today, if we see that opposition means that opposition party thinks that they have to oppose for the sake of opposition every decision of the ruling party or the government. And this is creating more chaos, because without understanding the implication of any of the rules, regulations, any bills which is being passed in the parliament, whether it is good for the country or not, they are creating more obstacles and creating in the process this obstacle of not allowing the government to function properly to bring the changes what is required for the development of the country. At the same time, we have to also uphold the democratic value. We cannot neglect that we are not a democratic country, and in the process we cannot take autocratic decisions. So we have to take all the stakeholders in our decision making process, and that takes a lot of time. If you look at China, China is almost like an autocratic country. When we compare that, China has become a developed country within the span when we got independence and China got the independence at the same time, from 1980 onwards, China became more and more prosperous, and in the process it has overtook so many economies, and today it is almost like second biggest economy in the world after USA. And why is this transformation? That we have to understand that so many aspects of governance are overlooked by China, and that is why they have been able to create a better economy for them, and world thinks that it is a better economy. But on the human side, the index of human rights, if you look at it, there are so many violations by China which nobody talks about. So comparison with China is not at all a good proposition for a democratic country like India. Again, we have challenges from law and judiciary. Our law system and judiciary system is borrowed from British system. And we have so many layers of law and judiciary that to take or come at a decision, it takes years and years. We have recently seen that Ram Janmabhoomi, the issue which has been languishing in the court for almost decades and decades, it was not coming to any conclusion, and so many problems are coming because of this kind of delay in any kind of arriving at a decision. So law and judiciary also is a challenge for the Atmanirbhar Bharat. Again, skirmishes on the borders which we are seeing right now at the Ladakh border or entire eastern sector, and Pakistan has been a problem for us on the western side from independence. So these are also the challenges which we cannot overlook. But in a sense, this kind of skirmishes has given us an opportunity to revisit our plans for becoming Atmanirbhar. Then we are surrounded by the SAARC countries, where also there are political turmoils going on regularly, and that is also a challenge for us. Same way, we have multilateral relationships with different countries, and that is also impediment in making any kind of decisions to become a Atmanirbhar Bharat. And terrorism, the last one, is also a big blow. Whenever we want to attain certain things, we are always challenged by the terrorist activities from across the border and from within India, like Maoism and Naxalism, which is creating more and more problem. Next slide, please. The next one is all about social challenges. So as you know, we are a multi-religion country, and religious problems are also a very challenging task to accomplish anything and everything what we want to do. And we have seen recently that more and more religious conflicts are happening, which was non-existence if you go back 40, 50 years back. You will not find, when we were born in our era, there were no problems with this kind of religious skirmishes or distrust between the communities. Today we are finding so much of distrust among the communities, which is creating more problem for a stable economy. Next is all about cultural problems. We are a diverse country and we are a multicultural society. And on this basis also, we are finding so many problems when one culture against the another culture, which is always at the loggerhead. You have seen how problems in Rajasthan, Haryana, the Jat Andolan and all these things are going on. Same way, if we look at reservation policy, the government has created reservation policy way back to uplift the downtrodden people. But this reservation policy has continued and it never got the result which it wanted to bring with this reservation policy. So in a sense, reservation policy has been able to attain certain parameters to uplift the society, but it has failed in many areas to address even after 73 years of independence. So we should really look at the reservation policy, because today's youth is feeling let down when they want to get admission into better education institutions. They feel that people with low grades, they are allowed to enter the education system, and because of this caste system and other things, they are deprived of their right. Next is all about gender bias. Gender bias is also a big problem and social issue when we don't give due credit to man woman parameters, that man is always considered superior or male is considered superior than a female, which is not the case. Female for ages, they have been the backbone of the society, but still we consider ourselves as a male dominated society, and that is also creating several problems which we will discuss later also. Next is about value system. So there is a clear erosion of values in our society, and we have to stem this rot of erosion of the value system. Our joint family system was a backbone for the society to cover up so many problems which we are facing today as a single family. And that also needs to be addressed in terms of becoming Atmanirbhar. Last and next one is population growth. Today we are challenged with population growth. It is unabated population growth which is eating away all the resources which the government is creating or the nature has given to us. And this erosion of or growth, population growth is negating all these values of our social problems which is creating, which is for a sustainable society. So what we are seeing today is a real challenge, and any exploitation of natural resources is not going to be replenished very soon. It takes ages to replenish this exploitation of natural resources. And with this explosion in the population, we are depleting all our natural resources. We are going to face more water problems. We are going to face land problems. We are going to face agricultural problems. All these problems, it's creating more and more problem for our society as a whole. The next slide, please. Next is about economical problems. The economy is always challenged, and the first is about food, shelter, and clothing. Everywhere in the world, if you find that the first basic necessity of human being is about food, shelter, and clothing. So food-wise, we are almost sufficient today with the green revolution and more agricultural revolutions. We are getting better crop management system. We have so many agricultural universities which is helping our farmers in many ways. Mechanicalized farming is also helping to get better production, but almost 12% of our agriculture produce is being lost in supply chain, and that is almost like a $12 billion cost. And that is one of the big area where we have to address that, how to minimize the wastage in supply chain. Because whatever you have produced, if you cannot sell it to the people or bring it to the people, and in between it is wasted, it is a crime. Although we have sufficient food, we cannot provide it to the people because of our inefficient supply chain is our own problem, and we can address this problem very well. And there is a huge opportunity to become self-sufficient in this area. Next is about job creation. As I mentioned to you, that we are always looking at job creation, but job creation can come only when we are creating more and more industrial production, more and more service sector production areas. And that is our responsibility, that how we can become entrepreneur to create more jobs rather than to seek more jobs. The next is about industrial growth. We are attaining good industrial growth. Our GDP is also almost like earlier we used to have about 20-23% of the agriculture production to support the GDP out of GDP, and we had about 25 to 26% of the GDP depending on the industrial growth. And we are sustaining this industrial growth through that 26% GDP component. But we have to look at more and more automation in this new age, the digital age. AI, ML, AR, VR, all these things is going in future as the main area where all the industries will be looking at. So how to automate more and more production. But here again, we'll be facing a dilemma that if we automate most of the processes, then where do we employ our youth? So that is also going to be a problem for the society. So we'll have to address that one. Next is about income disparity. Income disparity is also a real social cause which we have neglected so far. Today, I can tell you that 54% of the wealth is lying with only handful of people, and 1% of these people, they are controlling almost like 74% of the wealth, and 10% of the wealthy people are controlling 80% of the wealth of the society. So there is a huge income disparity, and that is creating more problem for the society. So we have to look at balanced growth and balanced opportunity for everyone. Same way it is about regional imbalances. As on today, only 5 states in India is giving 45% of the GDP of the nation, like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and UP. These 5 states are providing 45% of the GDP of the country. So you can imagine that we have about 22 large states and about 7 to 8 union territories and smaller states. And out of that, we are only 5 states are contributing 45% of the GDP. Then what the rest of the states, they are underdeveloped, and that is where we have to look at how a balanced growth can increase the income level and create more parity with the other population in other states. The technology adoption is also going to help us. If we do not look at technology adoption, then we are going to be a laggard economy. So more and more new technology we have to adopt in terms of production, in terms of agriculture, in terms of services, everywhere. Because technology is going to drive the future of every country in the world. And if we are not there to sustain this technological revolution, what I call, then we will not be able to match with the other economies of the world. And when we are aspiring to become from a 3 trillion economy to 5 trillion economy in next 5 years, it is not going to be achievable for us. And Corona has also created a problem right now. And this Corona period, we have seen negative growth in terms of GDP. So we have to sustain that or to achieve that target of 5 trillion economy, we'll have to work very hard. And technology is going to help us in many ways to attain this growth. Next is about export. Our export-import imbalance is creating more and more problems for our economy. We are almost like 184 billion in negative in terms of our export-import. But today, we are actually having good foreign exchange reserves, and our foreign exchange reserves very recently, some 10 days back, the figure was that almost we have 555 billion in foreign exchange reserves. If you remember, I think you people may not have been born around that time. In 1990, 1991, we had a meager foreign exchange reserves to sustain 12 days of import for our country. And at that time, the government had to pledge our gold. The Reserve Bank, which is holding the gold, we had to pledge it with Bank of England to get the necessary foreign exchange. And that is where the revolution started. And after 1991, the new revolution has reshaped our economy. We'll talk about it later in my presentation. And then about monetary policy. So RBI's intervention in terms of monetary policy is, to some extent, it is helping out industries to revive the industry, but at the same time, it is creating more and more problems for the individuals and mainly the senior citizens who are completely dependent on the FD interest rates, because that is the only income source the senior citizens have. And the government also doesn't have proper social security programs to support the senior citizens or the people who are dependent on interest income. So it is going to be a more serious problem than what we think it today. Next slide, please. Yeah, the next challenge is all about educational front. So we have the 4 problems in educational areas. One is about the regulation. Second is about the curriculum design and pedagogy. Third is about skill-based education. and fourth is creating the entrepreneurial mindset. So regulation wise, recently the government has come out with new education policy 2020, and there are so many regulations. The educational institutions are not able to cope up with these regulations. They are so ambiguous, and there is no clarity on what the government wants to control and what the institutions should provide. There is clearly mismatch, and government is trying to figure out that how to overcome all these problems. So recently the government has converted the HRD ministry into Ministry of Higher Education, and AICTE and UGC, they are also going to get merged to create a new kind of system where the regulations will be uniform across the universities. Government has also come out with a new policy to direct that there will be three kind of universities. One will be the research oriented universities, another will be the teaching universities, and third will be the skill based universities. So many new initiatives are being undertaken by this government. But as I mentioned earlier, also we are having so many political challenges, and many people are creating more and more hurdles also in terms of implementation. Again, the next one is about curriculum design and pedagogy. We have been teaching the same stuff over last 40-50 years. We have never changed what is the requirement of today. We have been teaching the courses of yesterday, and that is where more problems are going to be faced by us. And to create a better youth for tomorrow, we have to redesign the curriculum, redesign the pedagogy, and create the knowledge pool for future, not yesterday. Same thing, we have to also look at skill-based education. We have neglected the skill-based education system. Earlier we had ITIs where skill-based education was available, but we have always looked down to the people who are coming out of ITIs because they are considered as a diploma holders. We never give them the status of a degree holder people. And now this government, through this new skill-based universities, we are going to create more equilibrium and equalization in terms of what they are getting the diplomas and degree. And we are also coming out with new regulations where you can drop and join anytime during your career. So if you are completing first year, you can get a certificate. If you are completing a second year, you will get a diploma. If you complete the third year, you will get a degree. So something, this kind of new format is coming up so that people are not deprived of the education, and it will be like a continuous education throughout your journey. And there will be more and more re-evaluation and evaluation during this process. And this will create the entrepreneurial mindset. Our society has turned away from the entrepreneurial mindset to, with this knowledge economy, we have created more and more people who are looking at job, and we have neglected entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, mostly, they are not bound by the boundaries, and they don't like to be regulated. They want to do their stuff, which is their passion. And we don't, through this education system, we don't recognize the passion of the youth. So that is also a big problem and challenge. So how to overcome this one? Next slide, please. So Atmanirbhar Bharat is like, I have segregated it into three different eras. The first one is about pre-independence. That was before 1947 or the British era. The second is about post-independence, and post-independence I have segregated it into two phases. The first phase is 1947 when we got independence till 1991. And then that was the era of license Raj and control economy. And next one was economic liberalization post 1991, when we have seen that there is a competitive market, free trade, and globalization. So this three phase has completely redefined the way we are today and how we are going to reshape our future. And you are the youth, you are the future of this country. And if you take it seriously, you are definitely going to reshape the country going forward. So let us talk about what happened during pre-independence. It is very much essential for you people to understand that what our forefathers had done for this country. Today we are talking about Atmanirbhar, Swadeshi, all those things. But this is just we are revisiting the Swadeshi Andolan today, which was started in 1905. Let us talk about it, and we move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So British era during 18th and 19th century, our main business or trade which was happening in India, the early signs of independence in doing the business and trade was all started through banking industry. And in those days, the banking was defined as Angadiya service. So many trade which was happening at that time, it was all about bartering because people had no money. There was no currency at that time. So whatever you are producing, if you have excess of the produce, you exchange it for what you require from another person who has his produce or he has his services. So suppose there is a dhobi, he is doing pressing of your clothes. So that is his job. And if you are a farmer, you are producing say rice, then whole year he will press your clothes for free, and in return he will get some rice from you. So that is why the way they were balancing the economy. And thereafter, when currency system came in, at that time everything was started counting in terms of currency. So you don't need to do any service for anyone because your service or your produce is now counted in terms of the money. And exchange of money was a big problem, that how to carry the money. And that is where this banking or Angadiya service started, and people were giving their money or depositing at one place, and when they are going to another city, they were going to get that money from the people in that city. And that is how this banking services started. So in 1770, Bank of Hindustan was established, and 1786, the General Bank of India, which was established in India. But in the process, both the banks failed and they had to close down. In 1806, three banks started operating out of three major metros. One was Bank of Calcutta, because Calcutta was seat of power during this time, British times. Then Bank of Bombay, which was again the main trading center or hub, and Bank of Madras. So that was also like Portuguese, they had their presence in Madras. So these were the three main hub, and these three, because of the port cities of these three places, the banks were established in these places. These three banks later on merged, and today what we know as State Bank of India is the result of the merger of these three banks of Bank of Calcutta, Bank of Bombay, and Bank of Madras. In 1865, Allahabad Bank was established, and 1895 Punjab National Bank was established. Thereafter, in 1906, Bank of India, Bank of Baroda in 1908, and 1911, Central Bank of India was established. Central Bank of India was established by two Parsi gentlemen, Sorabji Pochkanwala and Firoz Shah Mehta. This was the history about the banking, which was the core of the economy at any place, anytime, even today, and it will remain the main backbone of any economy. The next phase started in terms of manufacturing, and manufacturing was started with the cotton mills, because as I mentioned you, that food, shelter, and clothing are the three main component of the economy. So clothing was the main component in terms of how to produce the cotton for our country. We were importing cotton from British India. Manchester was exporting all the cotton to us because they were buying all the raw cotton from India, converted into the cloths, and this clothes was again re-imported back to India. So in this way, we were paying all our resources was depleted, and British were taking away all our resources. So in 1854, Bombay Spinning and Weaving Mill was established. That was the first spinning and weaving mills for cloths was established in India. And in 1861, Shahpur Mills in Ahmedabad was established by Ranchod Lal Chotalal. In 1863, Karamchand Premchand and Sarabhai family, they established the calico mill. And mind well, these mills were established for a Swadeshi cause. And at that time, Mahatma Gandhi was still not born. So there were people before Gandhi who thought about Swadeshi Andolan, and Swadeshi Andolan was started at that time in some fashion. But main Swadeshi Andolan started in 1905. So let's talk about 1871, Thakursi mill was established and Morarji Gokuldas established Thakursi mill. At the same time, in 1889, in the north in Delhi, Lala Sriram Group established the DCM textile mills. So all the textile mills which were established mainly in Bombay and Ahmedabad, but Lala Sriram established the mill in Delhi also. Next phase was all about stock exchange. In July 9, 1875, Native Share and Stock Brokers Association was established under a banyan tree, which is at Dalal Street in today's Bombay. And this was established by 5 gentlemen, 4 Gujarati and 1 Parsi. And that sowed the seed of the stock exchange in India. And it is the oldest stock exchange in Asia, and first ever stock exchange in Asia was established in India during those times. It's very interesting to know that stock exchange is the parameter of the activities of the economic criteria of any country. And today we are seeing our stock exchange, how it is performing. It is all thanks to these 4 Gujarati and 1 Parsi gentlemen who established the first stock exchange. Officially, it was like a society, but thereafter it was converted into the official stock exchange. That is what is called the Bombay Stock Exchange. And later on, National Stock Exchange was also established in 1995. So let us think about how the Swadeshi Andolan and movement all started. Jamshedji Tata, at one point of time, he came to know that in Bombay there was only one 5-star category hotel, Watson Hotel, and in that hotel, Indians were not allowed to stay. And there were many princes who used to go to Bombay from Gujarat or Patiala or many states in other parts of India. And these people, they were not allowed to stay in that Watson Hotel. So it is being talked that they met with Jamshedji Tata, and Tata established Taj Mahal Hotel in 1903, and which is the first 5-star hotel which was established by Tata. And it was the first hotel to have electric bulbs at that time. And as I mentioned, that Tata also established Tata Steel, which was the first steel plant established by Tata when he came back from France and he was visiting the area of today's Jharkhand, the Jamshedpur area, which is rich with iron ore, rich with coal, which are the 2 major ingredients to manufacture steel. And at that time, British people were laying down the railway lines all across India, and there was a huge demand for the rail lines. How to get this? So all the steel was imported from Britain. So at that time, Tata thought that why not to produce these rail lines over here in India and supply it to British people so that we can also prosper. And in the process, he got established the first Tata Steel mills in India. That was the first steel plant established in India by any person. At the same time, 1905, Swadeshi movement was launched in Calcutta. And that was the result when Britishers wanted to split Calcutta, that is today's Bengal. At that time, it was a unison Bengal, which was West and East Bengal. And the population of Bengal was almost 78 million. So Britishers thought that it is too big a population to manage in one state. So they wanted to bifurcate Bengal into East Bengal and West Bengal. And that is where there was a resistance by the people. And then there was the Swadeshi movement was launched by Bal Gangadhar Tilak and others. And that is where the seeds were sown for how to resist the Britishers movement and to make India self-dependent. In 1918, Birla Jute Mill, first jute mill was founded by G.D. Birla. in Calcutta. At the same time, 1920, Jamnalal Bajaj also he established Bajaj Group in Wardha and Nagpur, and he started with Bachraj ginning and spinning factory because all the cotton was being produced in the region of Amravati and Akola in Maharashtra, which is very close to Wardha. And Bajaj family, they started baling process for this cotton which was being produced in that region, and then this was being shipped to export to the mills all across in India at that time and outside India also. So these were the people who had the foresight to think about how to make India a producing nation, a manufacturing nation, because before that India was always has been an agrarian economy. Until early 18th century, India was the largest nation in terms of GDP, in terms of foreign trade. And almost world's 54% of their foreign trade was happening through India. And with this automation, the things started changing. And that is where we started becoming a laggard and we lost most of our fortune. If you look at our history, you will find that always India had been under siege and people started attacking from all corners. At one point of time, the Huns came from the north, they looted India. Then Afghans came from the north, they looted India. And then we have seen that Spanish and Portuguese, French people, everybody came, they looted India, and British also came, they looted India. Because India was the place where all the wealth was available. World was not at that time so wealthy. Whatever we are seeing today, developed economy, it is all because of the later age of automation. They started manufacturing, and in the process, they become a developed economy. But India always remained a trading economy, and that is where we started lagging behind. So next phase was about the shipping industry. So shipping in 1919, Narottam Morarji and Walchand Hirachand came together and established Scindia Steam and Navigation Company, which was the first steamship navigation company in India, which owned its own steamship. At that, before that, all the produce which was being produced in India or with whatever we were importing, it was all done through British ships. So they thought that why should not we have our own ship and we can establish our own shipping company. So these two gentlemen, they established the first shipping company in India at that time. And they bought SS Loyalty, which from the Scindias of Gwalior, and converted it into the first ship of this company. And that was the 5th April 1919. And today, in 1964, National Maritime Day celebrated this as 5th April 1919, which was the starting point of our shipping industry and tipping point. Thereafter, GE Shipping was established in 1948 by Maneklal and Jagjivan Seth, the Seth brothers, along with Ardeshir Bhiwandiwala. And thereafter, in 1940, again, Narottam Morarji thought that, okay, I am having this ship, but if I have to service the ship, what do I do? So he thought of establishing the shipyard. And in 1940, he established the first shipyard in India at Visakhapatnam, which was called Scindia Shipyard, which later was nationalized. And today what we know it is Hindustan Shipyard at Visakhapatnam. This was nationalized by, earlier it was taken over by the British people to service their ships during the Second World War. And in 1940 again, Narottam Morarji had approached Walchand Hirachand to join hands to establish the shipyard, but Walchand Hirachand had something else in mind. He came to Bangalore and he met with the Maharaja of Mysore and asked him to become a partner to establish an aircraft manufacturing unit in Karnataka. So those days it was called State of Mysore, and Maharaja of Mysore joined hands with him and they started manufacturing the aircraft, basically to service the aircraft. And that one again was taken over by government, British government at that time, to service the aircraft which were fighting the Second World War. So all the fighter jets which were being used by Britishers during 1940 were being serviced at this Hindustan aircraft facility, in Bangalore. And later on, it got nationalized. And today, what we know it is Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So just understand that those people, they were never educated. They never went to any school, college, but they established this kind of giant ventures, which is all sheer grit and determination of their entrepreneurship skill. Thereafter, we have to also think about the history of Godrej Group. Godrej Group was established in 1895 by Ardeshir Godrej and Piroj Shah Godrej, the two brothers. Ardeshir Godrej, he was a lawyer. He went to Zanzibar to fight a case where he couldn't justify his client because he was looking at the defendant and the offendant both. And he thought that this is not the right way for me to do the practice. So he came back to Bombay and started serving at a surgical shop. But he approached the Kama family, Bombay, and asked them for a loan of 3,000 rupees to manufacture the surgical equipments because everything was being imported from Britain. And he thought that he is best at manufacturing these surgical equipments. So he approached Kama and took a loan of 3,000. Kama asked him that your father is wealthy. Why don't you get some money from him? Why you are approaching me for the loan? Because those days banks were not giving loans to anybody and everybody. So he said that if I go to my father will not give me the loan, but he will give me the money as a gift. And I don't want any gift or charity from anybody, even if it is my father. And if I take a loan, I have an obligation to return it back to you. Unfortunately, when he manufactured those scalpels and other things, the surgical equipments which were best at that time, he approached the shop owner and he said that why can't we sell it in this shop? But his condition was that I will make it, mark it as a manufactured in India, made in India product. And the shop owner said that, are you mad? You cannot make or sell anything which is made in India. And these are high quality surgical equipments which cannot be made in India or sold by any manufacturing unit in India. And Godrej was so adamant, he said that no, if you don't allow me to sell or market as a made in India product, I will not manufacture or not sell it over here. So he had to shut down that unit. But thereafter, he came to know that there were so many robberies and other things were happening. And there was a news article about it. So he thought that why not to manufacture locks in India? And that set the Godrej lock manufacturing unit in India, which was again made in India. And thereafter, rest is history, that from lock manufacturing, they started manufacturing Godrej safes. And Godrej safes at that time, they manufactured it in a way that it was fireproof. So there was a big fire which happened in Calcutta, and all the documents and everything which was kept in Godrej safes were quite safe. And the British safes were not so safe. So documents and other jewelries and equipments were burned down in that theft. So they got a big boost about made in India. And at that time, again, Godrej thought of setting up a soap manufacturing unit. So all the soaps at that time which was being manufactured in India were using animal tallow. So Godrej thought that why we should use animal tallow, and there was no manufacturing facility or there was no R&D at that time which had created anything without animal tallow soap. But Godrej took it on himself and he started experimenting with vegetable oil, and he came up with a soap which was manufactured with vegetable oil. So all this, there was a passion to do something for the country and for the nation, which led to these kind of enterprises to be set up. So Godrej was the first to set up the soap manufacturing unit using only the vegetable oil. Next phase was about aviation. And as you know, many of you must have read that Tata was the first person to start Tata Airlines way back in 1942. And later on, it was nationalized. And today, we know it as Air India. And what is the condition of Air India under government? So Gujaratis, Parsis, and Marwadis from Rajasthan, they have immensely contributed in creating local manufacturing base and have sown the seeds of industrialization in India. And Kachis, Marwaris, and Parsis are called the entrepreneurial race of India. And in Kutch and Rajasthan, it is told that you are born to get out of the region because those are the arid regions. You cannot do any farming, you cannot produce anything over there. So to survive, you have to leave that place where you are born and go and get out to some place where you can earn your living. So what we call it is that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And this is the race, which is a tough race. So they started all this industrialization and manufacturing states. Next, we come to the next slide, please. No, next one. (1947 to 1990). Yeah. The post-independence era was 1947 to 1990. When India got independence, at that time, Britishers were having most of the manufacturing facilities. They were owners of the tea gardens, they were owners of the jute mills, and they were owners of the coal mines. And when they started leaving India after independence, the Marwaris in Calcutta, they started buying out all the tea gardens, jute mills, and coal mines around those places, because all the jute mills and tea gardens were in Assam, jute mills were mostly in West Bengal, and coal mines were mostly in Bihar, which was a unified Jharkhand and Bihar as we know today. So, but that was the era of license Raj, and license Raj has done so much of damage to this country and the economy we are facing today is because of this license Raj. So everything, whatever we wanted to manufacture needed a license. And without government's node, you cannot manufacture even a single Alpine also, or a car. So everything was controlled. When Birlas established the car manufacturing ambassador car, they were allowed to manufacture only 5,000 cars. Same way, Walchand Hirachand, as I said, that they started manufacturing, they also started getting into manufacturing of the cars. They were allowed to produce Fiat cars, only 5,000 numbers. Tatas were allowed to manufacture the trucks, only 5,000 numbers. That was the kind, at that time, Bajaj scooters, when Bajaj started manufacturing scooters, they were allowed to manufacture only X number of scooters. There was huge demand. And at one point of time, I remember that Bajaj scooter, which was costing 7,000 rupees in 1970, maybe 70, 72, you had to pay in black another 7,000 rupees to own a Bajaj scooter. So understand, 100% marking was there in black market for a Bajaj scooter. This was the condition of our country. That led to establish the pharma companies, the automobiles, the two-wheelers, the bicycles, the white goods, the TV appliances when TV started coming in, and all the foreign collaborations. That was the age of foreign collaborations, because India had no technology. India was not a manufacturing hub. We had no sophistication, we had no automation, no machineries to manufacture all these things. So it all started with collaborations, like Honda's came, Suzuki came, this kind of companies, Kawasaki came with Bajaj. So all these were into foreign collaborations. Then at that time, Nehru was more about establishing the large scale enterprises under state government, central government. So we have seen that large capital intensive project, because bank finance were not coming through. So government started establishing units like Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited, Hindustan Aeronautic Limited, ITIs, the Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL, then Steel Authority of India, SAIL, which has 3 big steel plants at Bokaro, at Rourkela, and at Bhilai. And fourth one was at Durgapur Steel Plant. Then we established the ONGC, Oil and Natural Gas Commission, to explore oil and manufacture other products. Same way, Gas Authority of India was established to carry gas from pipeline from the field of ONGC and other fields. Same way, Hindustan Coppers Limited, Indian Farmer Fertilizer Corporation Limited, so Air India, BSNL, MTNL, all these were the behemoths which was established by government. But because of the government policies, most of these units are today either in red or many have closed down. The nationalization of coal mines and banks and insurance companies happened during this time of 69 to 72. And thereafter, all the oil distribution companies were nationalized, and HPCL, BPCL, and IOC was created. Because during that time, when we are fighting with Pakistan, at that time, the oil companies which were operating out of India, they refused to give any oil to government. And because of that, Indira Gandhi became so furious. So she nationalized all the oil distribution companies and created these three big companies, HPCL, BPCL, and IOC in the process. At the same time, Reliance Industries came in on the scene, and they established the first polyester fabric manufacturing company in India. And later on, as we know today, that they have ventured into oil production and petrochemical plants, refining plant. All these things happened because the first plant was established during that time. That was the time when we had a very good capital market and equity dilution was the norm. So all the foreign companies which were operating out of India had to dilute their equity and made Indian public participate in that process. So companies like Brook Bond, Ponds India, or what we know today, Nestle, all these companies, Colgate, they had to dilute their equity. And in the process, Indian public started investing in those companies. At that time, our GDP was just $266 billion. Next slide. The next phase of economic liberalization started after 1990. That was the time when we have seen that software services started gaining momentum, and companies like TCS, companies like Infosys and Wipro, they started venturing into more and more software and services, and which is today the main backbone of our foreign exchange earning. What we have the edge today over other countries is our knowledge economy, and this is the phase when we started with this knowledge economy. This is the time when we dismantled all the license raj, and we have seen that how more and more automobile companies started coming to India, started putting up their manufacturing plant. The new modern technology was established in the process. The aviation sector also got renewed. There was only one company, Air India, which was operating at that time. And thereafter, we have seen that Indigo, SpiceJet, Go Air, all these companies, they started operating. The first one at that time, Kingfisher, Jet Airlines, Sahara Airlines, so many airlines started operating at that time. That changed the way we travel today, and it has a lot to contribute to our economic progress. Same thing happened with the telecom. Earlier, we were having only landline telephones, and which was controlled by BSNL and MTNL, and you cannot get a telephone line even after waiting for 15 years. If you apply today, after 15 years, you will get. It was just like getting a green card to US was easier than getting a telephone line in India, and that was all about black marketing and license raj. But when we started dismantling the license raj, we have seen that mobile phone today, you order it today and you get it in 10-15 minutes. You go to any of the place and ask for a SIM card, they will activate it in 24 hours, but you get the SIM card within 15 minutes after completing necessary KYC now. So telecom revolution, aviation revolution, automobile revolution, same thing happened with banking and insurance. More and more competition started happening in the banking industry, and private banks were allowed to operate. So HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, then UTI, which got converted into Axis Bank. This bank started operating, and lending and everything became easy. So more industrialization started happening through this banking and insurance revolution also. As on today, we know what e-commerce is changing the digital economy and the way you function, because you are the product of this e-commerce age. And you know that Flipkart or the Feature Group or Amazon, these companies, how they are revolutionizing the product and services both in terms of providing you within wherever you are at any location. You order from any place and it can be delivered to any place. You can order it in Bangalore for your parents in Ghaziabad, and it will get delivered in Ghaziabad within 48 hours. So this is the kind of business which is happening. Again, you look at Ola and Oyo, or the big basket of the world, what they have done. This digital transformation has done a tremendous service and increase in our consumption value also, as well as the way we think or operate. Before that, to get a taxi, it was a nightmare. But today you order any cab anywhere with the application, which was unthinkable in our time. Just 10 years back, nothing was existent. So you have seen that 10 years before, what was your life and what is the change within last 5 years, I can say. So how the smartphone has also changed your life. Same thing we are looking at today is with Corona, Byju's or Upgrade, how they have changed the education pattern. And they have created billion-dollar companies in the process within this 3 to 4 years, which is unthinkable. Any company, you look at the progress of the Tata Group or Adani Group or anybody to create a $1 billion company. It took them ages, it took them decades. And today we see that with this new age knowledge economy, you can create a $1 billion economy within 4 to 5 years if you are playing your cards right. Same thing you look at Paytm, the Swiggy's and Zomatos of the world. How you are ordering your food, how you are getting your food at home or wherever at any place. It is so convenient. But all these things has opened up a new avenues of business for the people of this new generation. And all these companies have been established by people like you who are coming out or who are still studying and they are entrepreneurial in their mindset. They have established this kind of company. The promoter of Oyo or promoter of Ola or Big Basket or Byju's are all of around 30, 34 years of age. And when they started this venture, they were just about 25, 27 years of age. In the old age, we have seen the Reliance, the Ambani family or the Adani, the Tatas or Birlas, GMR, GVK Group, Sun Pharma, controlled by Dilip Sanghvi, Dr. Reddy's, Glenmark Pharma, Maruti and Mahindras in tractor. They are world leaders. Mahindras today, they are producing the largest number of tractors in the world. Same thing like L&T, the DRDO and ISRO, they are opening up new avenues for people like you who want to really contribute in any way in manufacturing through the DRDO, through ISRO. They have developed the technologies. You can use this technology and established as an ancillary unit for ISRO or DRDO. CSRI has created so many labs and they have so many technologies available. We have seen how the growth of in consumer products, Haldiram's. What Haldiram was just 4 decades back. He was having just a small shop selling some bhujiyas. And today we have seen Haldiram's is a $1 billion company. Patanjali has become a $1 billion company. Amul, in cooperative sector, it has set an example that how you can establish taking everybody along with you and create $1 billion enterprise. Same way we have seen that Khadi Village Industries Commission, they are also contributing to the growth of the nation with a almost like 40,000 crore of turnover, which is Khadi is having. Same thing we think about ITC. And then there's new age aviation companies, which we talked about, Indigo or Go Air or SpiceJet. The Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL Technology, Tech Mahindra, all this we talked about in our software and services business. So at that today, our GDP, the industry contributes 26%, the agriculture contributes 15.4%, but services sector contributes almost 61%. And that is the mainstay. So we have to see that how we can still increase the industries dependent from 26% to even more and better. Next slide, please. All this is the result of access to now the new age banking, what we call it is private equity and the venture capital. This kind of companies like Oyo, Paytm, Zomato, Swiggy, all these are backed by huge private equity and venture capital. They are putting more money into these kind of companies because they see a very bright future. Today we have seen how Reliance Industries for this Jio platform, they could get $20 billion during this Corona period when nobody is investing and no FDI was coming to India or to any other country, Jio was able to attract $20 billion within 3 months. And now in Jio retail also, they are getting investment of about 10 to 11 billion dollar. So if you have the right product, right mix, then people are ready to invest. They are ready to put money. Money is not a problem because we have no limitation of where to get the money from. People all across the globe are looking at better opportunities, and India with 135 billion of population is a big market, and it is an untapped market. So our household contribution to GDP is still very low at almost like 11 to 12%. And US contribution of household consumption to the GDP, to US GDP is 18%. And US GDP is far bigger than Indian GDP. So you can understand that if we can increase our GDP contribution of household consumption from 11 to 18% to match US, it is almost like doubling of our GDP, and you can imagine what big market lies ahead. And this has been aided by SEBI and NSE. Today, the total market capitalization of our country, all the listed companies, is 2.11 trillion or 161 trillion in rupee term. And just consider this against US, where the total capitalization market cap of all the companies listed in US stock exchanges is 35.96, almost 36 trillion. So 2 trillion and 36 trillion. Look at the gap. China has 9.43 trillion total market cap of their listed companies, and total world market cap of all the listed companies all over the world is 88 trillion. So we are just a minuscule fraction in this participation of the corporate entities where we have the listed companies, and huge potential is still untapped. So what we think about today is that our capitalization market cap is total about 18 times or 14 times of earnings. It is still, we have not reached the level where we should look at, and world is looking at us. They are investing in India, and we should be ready to grab this opportunity. This is the time going global for mergers and acquisitions. Tatas have done it, Mahindras have done it, the Godrej have done it, many other companies are doing it. In software also, we have seen regularly that Infosys is buying companies outside India, Wipro is buying companies outside India, TCS is also doing the same thing. So there are so many opportunities, and Indian companies are now becoming more bigger and more globally oriented in terms of their operations and in terms of their outlook also. So it is not that we are looking at India only as a market. World is the market for everybody today. We are also seeing that how the startup companies, how the valuation is attracting, and in the process, the wealth is being created by this new generation of youth, the X Gen or Y Gen or Z Gen. Again, MSME is core to India's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Our total 29% of GDP is being contributed by the MSME market. And there are 63 million micro, small and medium enterprises operating in India. And India's total exports, 48% exports is being contributed by micro, small and medium enterprises. Just imagine the power of MSME. We don't understand what is MSME, and recently government has revised the guidelines for MSME. So it is no more just the MSME which is having a capital like 1 crore, 2 crore, 5 crore. Government has allowed that your total capital can be 10 crore rupees and your investment can be 100 crore rupees, and your turnover can be 500 crore, and still you are in the category of MSME. And government is giving loan to MSMEs in a big way at attractive rate, and also promoting the products of MSME all over the world through trade fairs and so many other ways. So India today is like a 2.8 trillion economy, and we want to, this 2.8 trillion economy has grown over 30 years in 10 times. As I mentioned to you, before 1990, the India's total economy was $288 billion, and today it is $2.8 trillion. So 10 times in 30 years. But our target is how we want to transform and how we want to participate in the process to drive this 3 trillion economy to 5 trillion economy. It is not that we cannot achieve it. And recently also, World Bank report says that India can attain. Right now we are laggard. We are, due to Corona, the first quarter we were at minus 5% of GDP growth. And the second quarter showed that there is minus 23% GDP growth. But the IMF is also very positive, and they are saying that from 2021, India can achieve 9.4 to 10% growth easily. And if we can achieve 10% growth consistently over next 5 years, easily we can reach the 5 trillion economy target. So nothing is impossible. It is all that we have to believe in ourselves. India today is the third largest PPP economy and fifth largest GDP economy. Our total foreign exchange reserve is also 555 billion. So all these signs are very, very positive for us. And we are a nation with population, 65% population is youth. And this is the youth which is going to drive, because you are all new age youth. You are digital economy youth. You have all the power, you have all the understanding of the technology, how to use the technology for the betterment of our country. You know very well. Today we are struggling with the technology, but a child of 4 to 5 years, he knows how to operate a mobile phone, a smartphone, how to do the transaction on the smartphone. Everything is at hand to them. And in the process, our government over last few years, they have created, some most technologically marvel products like Aadhaar card. Today, your every KYC is being done by Aadhaar. Just give the Aadhaar card and everything is done. You don't need to produce any more documents. And Aadhaar is a platform which is such a secure platform today. World is looking at this technology, that how they can also use the Aadhaar for their own process. And India's digital payment system is one of the best today in everywhere in the world. US and Canada, these are the advanced countries. They are not using Paytm type of transaction. They are still using the debit card and credit card. And we have everything on our smartphone. So we have the Paytm, we have the UPI, we have the Bheem, all this, the Google Pay, the Tej. There are so many platforms now available. So this is all, it is an innovation which has become the need of the hour. And today you look at all the panwalas or the sabji thela walas, everybody is using Paytm. An auto rickshaw driver uses Paytm. There are so many platforms where you don't need to carry any cash with you. If you are traveling from one place to another place, there is no need to carry any cash. Everything is getting digital. And still our digital payment, towards total payment, it is still a minuscule. So if we can transform our economy to a digital economy, then we have a lot more to achieve in the process to drive from 3 trillion to 5 trillion. Same thing happened with Jan Dhan account. Our 63% of the population got the Jan Dhan account, which never had seen the banking in their lifetime. And that is also creating direct benefit transfer scheme, DBTS, by the government. So all the leakages and loopholes are being plugged, and real benefit is reaching to the right people. And these are going to be the consumers of the society. Earlier, all the money which was meant for these people was taken away by the system, and it was not reaching to the needy people. Same thing, the Jan Arogya plan. So people who are really needy people, they don't need to pay anything for their health, and their health, any problem is being taken care by the government hospitals and other private hospitals through this Jan Arogya scheme. Same is with Jan Suraksha scheme. And we have seen Gram Ujwala, where this gas and other things is been distributed to the families who are needy, and it is all free of cost. So in the process, we are making them equal to us in every sphere, in every rural area, they are becoming more and more equal to the urban people. That will help stem the flow from rural to urban, because whatever is available to urban people is available to rural people also. So there is no more discrimination between urban and rural economy. So rural economy is a very big economy. It is going to get more drive from this initiatives by government. So what are the focus areas? Next slide, please. So to become the Atmanirbhar Bharat, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the augmented reality, the virtual reality, the 3D printing, and the fourth one is all about R&D, the mobile app, the gaming, the pharma and healthcare. These are the four critical big focus areas which will drive the next generation of the economy. Government is now pushing more and more to manufacture all the defense equipments in India. And our total defense budget, if you look at it, then it's a huge budget. And if we can, every year we can add almost like 20% of the defense budget to manufacture in India, then India can get immediate transformation. So right now government has undertaken with the offset clause that whoever wants to sell any arms or ammunition to India, they have to create 30% of the manufacturing facility in India and deploy these resources for the Indian manufacturing. So today we are seeing Mahindra Defense, L&T Defense, Tata Autocom, Tata Defense, they all are very much active in manufacturing of the defense equipments. We have started manufacturing Bofors kind of machine guns and the tanks into India. Now Mahindra has already developed the same kind of defense system. The L&T has also started manufacturing. Again, next is all about aerospace and space technology. As I mentioned, that ISRO has opened up its facility for all kind of collaborations, even foreign collaborations and Indian companies who can manufacture, if they want to manufacture satellites, they want to start launching pad, then ISRO is going to help them. And this is going to be a very big area in terms of space technology. The government controlled ISRO, if we can launch the Mangalyaan at fraction of the cost of the world, they are really amazed how India can do it. And if ISRO can do it, other people in India, the entrepreneur skill, they can do it even much better. So there is no way anybody can hold you back if you want to achieve something in life. The next phase is going to be again with the robotics. So more and more robotics arms is going to come. It is not only that robo should walk or robot should talk. Robo is anything which is automation, is all about robotics. It is all about precision making. And when you want to manufacture in bulk, non-stop 24/7, then robotics is the only way. It can help you improve the farm produce also. If you want to have large farms, cooperative farms, at that level, you cannot do it by manual farming. So robotics will come into picture. Then artificial intelligence and machine learning is also going to help in all kind of improvement in the production and services. And AR, VR, that is also going to help or aid in this kind of manufacturing. Again, very precision manufacturing can be done through 3D printing, which is going to be a huge area which has not been explored at all in India. And very few 3D printing machines are right now available in India, which is only into laboratory scale, and some small components we are manufacturing for testing the material. But otherwise, it is going to create very skilled based employment opportunity and also at the same time entrepreneurial ability also. You can manufacture so many parts for very precision requirements for the industry in automobile, in space, in aeronauticals, everywhere. And next big thrust area is going to be the R&D. Again, mobile applications, we have seen that how mobile application has changed the world, like Oyo, Swiggy, or your Ola, Uber, all these things. And mobile gaming is again going to be a very big opportunity. Anybody who is interested in that area, because we have seen that mobile gaming industry is almost like 300 billion industry, and it's going to grow over time. So it is going to grow to almost like 900 billion industry. So if you are today, they say that if you are creating 10 mobile game, then out of 10 at least one will click, and if that one will click, it will bring in millions of dollars of opportunity for you. Same way, pharma and healthcare is another big area where we have seen that due to COVID, how suddenly there is an interest in manufacturing the vaccines in India, because the world doesn't have the capacity. Only Serum Institute of India has the capability to provide the vaccine. The other vaccine which they are manufacturing, the polio vaccine, they are the largest manufacturer in the world of polio vaccine and so many other vaccines. And they are contributed almost like 54% of world's needs of the vaccine. And today everybody, including Bill Gates, has approached Serum Institute to manufacture the COVID vaccine. So this is a very big area which we have to see that how we can leverage our strength to create more employment and become the world leader in all these areas. Pharma also, we have seen that earlier we were dependent on API from China, and today government has given free hand. They have asked all the states to create pharma sectors, and government is going to give 1,000 crore rupees for each pharma sector to establish the units over there. And government has given clear mandate that you manufacture from API to final doses in India only, so that we need not have to depend on any country for any of our need in India for the any kind of drugs or medicines which is required for the better health of this nation. So these are the things which we have to look at. Next slide, please. So I have completed my presentation, and lastly I will say that you are a man. I don't want to say it is like a gender, but just a statement that be a man but a human first. So whether you are a male or a female, but you have to become a human first, and you have to rise in stature, but always stay grounded, because anybody who wants to reach the top, they have to start from the ground. If you are not on the ground, you cannot reach anywhere. And if you want to reach to the pinnacle, then also you have to look at the ground, because that is where the place you are going to come down again. So don't leave your ground, rise in stature, be humble and have sympathy, and be a guide and a mentor to anyone around you, to your friends, to your family members, to your siblings, anyone. Because life is all about giving back to the society, and that is where you will get the real satisfaction of what you have learned and what you have earned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your eminent words. I hope that our audience have learned a vast knowledge about Atmanirbhar Bharat. Sir, there are some few questions from the audience.
Yes.
If you allow, can I ask?
Sure, yeah.
Sir, the first question is from Ms. Reena Mahajan. The question is, how can we overcome the low credit demand, which is the current most important issue in achieving the Atmanirbhar Bharat?
Low credit demand. I didn't get it. Low credit. Can you repeat the question? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is, how can we overcome the low credit demand, which is currently the most important issue in achieving Atmanirbhar Bharat?
No, it is only a temporary phase. So demand is all about, your need. And right now, everybody is looking at how to conserve the resources, because you are looking at uncertain future. You don't know that how this going to pan out further. Although we think that we are going to control it very soon once the vaccine is out, but still people are not taking it lightly, and they are still concerned about the future, immediate future, not the long-term future, but immediate future. So this is a very, short-term phenomena. It's not going to last it is not going to have more impact on the economy. So we shouldn't worry about this thing right now.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Mr. Pranjal Mehrotra. The question is, in what ways success of Atmanirbhar Bharat initiate hinge of Skill India?
Yeah. So Skill India is all about, there are two different things. The mindset of the entrepreneurship or becoming the Atmanirbhar Bharat and Skill India. These are two different things, but all interwoven. So unless and until you have a skilled society, you cannot become Atmanirbhar, because to become a as I mentioned you, this is a new age economy. And in new age economy, you have to be prepared for the new kind of skill set. If you don't have the new skill set, then you are not going to achieve what you want to achieve. Like, software and services, you have to have continuous upgrade of your skill. Every time a new software comes, you have to be adapt to it. And if you don't adapt it, you are going to be out of market. So whenever something new is coming, and software and hardware both are complementing each other. So anytime new hardware comes, it has to be supplemented with the new software also. So unless and until you are upgrading your skills, like I said, that 3D printing, if you don't know how to, earlier the Xerox machine came, and it was a simple technology. So any person who was a layman, he could do a Xerox machine, put up a Xerox machine and do the Xeroxing for you. If you go to him and ask him that I want to get this printed, he will do it. Before that, there was a huge machine. It used to come like, room size machine. And you had to put a slide over there, and there was a bulb. Every time it will flash, it will take the picture of the screen, what you want to print, and then there will be reimposed on the other